Dr. Harold Simmons grabbed Ava's wrist, hard enough to leave marks, and yanked her badge off her chest himself, the plastic clip snapping like a bone. He threw it on the floor, right there in the hallway, in front of everyone. Then he got close enough that she could feel his breath, his voice dropping to something uglier than a shout. "You touch that patient one more time, I will make sure you never work in any hospital in this country again. Ever." A rookie nurse, fired for checking a dying man's pulse. 37 seconds later, the Pentagon called, and they asked for her by name. Before we go any further, if you're watching this right now, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. It started the way most Tuesday mornings started at Mercy General Hospital in Alexandria, Virginia, with too many patients, not enough staff, and coffee that had been sitting on the burner since 5 in the morning. The fluorescent lights in the East Wing flickered the way they always did, and the overnight nurses were handing off charts with the hollow eyes of people who hadn't slept since Sunday. Ava Calloway had learned to read a shift by the sound of it before she even walked through the door. This morning the sound was wrong. She couldn't explain it exactly. It was something in the air, a tightness, a pressure, the way the hallways felt slightly too quiet even though they weren't. She had felt this before, in another life, in another uniform. She pushed that thought down before it could surface fully. Ava was 29 years old. She had brown hair she kept pinned back under her cap, dark eyes that missed very little, and hands that were steadier than most surgeons twice her age. She had been a nurse at Mercy General for 8 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days. She knew because she counted, not out of boredom, but out of discipline. Counting was something she did automatically, the way some people breathe through their mouth without realizing. Her supervisor that morning was Linda Chen, a 15-year veteran with the posture of a drill sergeant and the patience of a saint, except before 7 a.m., when she had the patience of neither. Linda handed Ava a tablet with the morning assignments before Ava had even taken off her jacket. "Room 412 is yours," Linda said. "New admit. Came in overnight through the private entrance. Charts thin. Patient refused full intake. Dr. Simmons personally authorized the admission, which means you do not ask questions, you do not deviate from the assigned care plan, and you knock before entering, even if the door is already open." Ava looked at the chart. It was thin, like Linda said. Name listed as John Doe. Age, estimated 40 to 45. Presenting complaint, dehydration, fatigue. No insurance information. No emergency contact, no medical history beyond 2 lines that looked like they'd been typed by someone in a hurry and then partially deleted. "Who authorized a private entrance admit with a John Doe chart?" Ava asked. Linda looked at her the way she looked at everyone who asked questions before 7 a.m. "Dr. Simmons," she repeated slower this time, as if Ava had missed it the first time. "Go check vitals. Do not engage beyond clinical necessity. Bring the readings back to me before you chart them." That last instruction was unusual enough that Ava almost said something. Nurses didn't bring readings back before charting them. That wasn't procedure. That wasn't anything. She noted it, filed it, and walked toward room 412. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, softer. Still nothing. She pushed the door open slowly, the way she'd been taught. Announce yourself, create space, don't startle anyone who might be disoriented. The man in the bed was not asleep. He was lying perfectly still with his eyes closed. But the stillness was all wrong. It wasn't the slack, heavy stillness of sleep or illness. It was controlled, deliberate. The stillness of someone who had trained themselves to become invisible, to occupy as little space in a room as possible, to be underestimated. He was wearing a gray hospital gown, but someone had let him keep his hoodie draped over the back of the bed, and Ava could see the edge of a tattoo at the base of his neck, the hooded figure of the Grim Reaper, rendered in stark black ink, so detailed it looked like it had been done by a military tattoo artist, someone who worked with precision and permanence in mind. Below the figure, in small Latin text she couldn't fully read from the doorway, two words, ending in what looked like mortis. She approached the bed quietly, reached for his wrist. The moment her fingers touched his skin, his eyes opened. Not slowly, not the way you wake up from a deep sleep, blinking and uncertain. Instantly, completely, like a switch had been thrown. His eyes were gray, not blue-gray, not green-gray, but the flat, clear gray of winter sky, and they fixed on her with an intensity she had not seen in a hospital room before. It was a look she recognized from a different context entirely, a context she was not supposed to be thinking about while taking vitals in room 412. She did not flinch. She kept her fingers on his wrist and held his gaze. "Pulse check," she said, her voice steady. "I'm your morning nurse. I'm going to take your vitals." He said nothing. He watched her the way a person watches something they are trying to decide about. "Your heart rate is elevated," she said, reading from her fingers before she even reached for the monitor. 58 and irregular at the upper bound. You've been awake for more than 24 hours. His eyes shifted, just slightly, just enough. "You're not supposed to notice things like that," he said. His voice was low, roughened, like someone who hadn't used it in days. "Probably not," she agreed, and reached for the blood pressure cuff. She worked quickly and efficiently, the way she always did. But her mind was running beneath the surface of the routine, cataloging what she was seeing. The scar tissue on his left forearm, inconsistent with any standard surgical procedure. The posture, even in a hospital bed, shoulders back, weight distributed, ready to move in a direction he hadn't chosen yet. The way he tracked the door every few seconds, not anxiously, professionally. She finished the vitals, noted them on her tablet without charting them, per Linda's instruction, and was about to step back when she noticed the IV line had been nudged. Not pulled out, not alarming, but shifted, the tape lifting slightly at the corner. Someone had touched it. She looked at it, then looked at him. "Did you adjust your line?" she asked. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The tape is lifting. The catheter shifted 2 millimeters. If you move your arm in a specific way." "I said I don't know what you're talking about." She resecured the tape. She didn't argue. She stepped back, gathered her equipment, and was almost at the door when he spoke again. "You have steady hands," he said. She paused without turning around. "Most nurses do." "Not like that," he said. "Not like you've done this under pressure." She turned her head just enough to look at him over her shoulder. He was watching her with that same flat, measuring expression. She held it for exactly 3 seconds, then walked out and pulled the door closed behind her. In the hallway, she stood still for a moment and let herself feel the thing she had been holding at arm's length since she walked into that room. The recognition, the familiarity of someone who lived by the same internal code she had spent the last 2 years trying to forget. She walked back to the nurse's station, handed Linda the tablet with the vitals, and said, "Nothing unusual." Linda glanced at the numbers, looked up and said, "Good, keep him comfortable, nothing else." "His line was shifted," Ava said. "I resecured it." "Fine." "His vitals suggest he's been awake significantly longer than the chart indicates." "Fine." "Linda, Ava." Linda set the tablet down and looked at her directly. "There are patients in this hospital whose paperwork I understand completely and whose care is entirely straightforward. And then there are patients like the one in 412. The difference is that I do not ask questions about the ones in 412, and neither should you." Ava nodded. She understood the message. She just wasn't sure she agreed with it. The morning progressed the way mornings in a hospital progress, not in a straight line, but in sudden lurches from one crisis to the next, with stretches of tedium in between that never quite let your nervous system relax. Ava handled 4 other patients, assisted with a procedure in the East Wing, administered medications on schedule, and checked on room 412 twice more. The second time, the man was genuinely asleep, or appeared to be. She checked his line, noted his color had improved slightly, and left. The third time was at 11:47 a.m. She had a new bag of saline for the IV and a medication update from the pharmacy that had come through Dr. Simmons's authorization. She knocked, pushed open the door. The man was sitting up in bed, and he was not alone. There was a figure standing at the window, a man in street clothes, no badge, no hospital ID, a jacket that sat slightly wrong across the shoulders in a way Ava recognized. He turned when she entered. He had the face of someone very comfortable with not being noticed, and the eyes of someone who noticed everything. "I'm here to update the IV," Ava said, keeping her voice completely neutral. "Set it down," the man by the window said. "We'll handle it." "That's not hospital procedure," Ava said. "Medication administration has to be documented by clinical staff." The man looked at the patient in the bed. The patient looked at Ava. "She's fine," the patient said quietly. The man by the window didn't move. "Protocol." "I said she's fine." Something passed between them. Ava didn't know what it was exactly, but she recognized its shape. The shape of a conversation that had been happening for a long time, about things neither of them was going to say out loud. The man by the window stepped back. Ava approached the bed, changed the IV bag with calm, practiced efficiency, documented it on the tablet, and left the room without another word. She was back at the nurse's station when Dr. Harold Simmons appeared. Dr. Simmons was 54 years old, barrel-chested, and accustomed to commanding a room with his physical presence in the same way some men command a room with their intellect. He was not an unintelligent man. He was, however, a man who had been running a hospital for 11 years and had developed the particular kind of certainty that comes from 11 years of having the final say on everything. "Calloway," he said, and his voice was already at the register that meant this was not going to be a pleasant conversation. Ava set down the tablet she'd been updating. "Dr. Simmons, did you enter room 4123 times this morning?" "I did, per my assignment and the medication schedule." "Did I not specifically instruct Linda Chen to communicate that patient was to have minimal contact and no deviation from the care plan?" "The care plan included vital checks and IV maintenance." "That's what I—" "Did you engage the patient in conversation?" She paused. "I confirmed the procedure I was performing. That's standard." "Did you engage the patient?" The nurse's station had gone quiet. Linda had turned around and was looking at a spot on the wall. Two orderlies at the far end of the hallway found reasons to walk in the opposite direction. "He spoke to me first," Ava said. Simmons set both hands flat on the counter. "You don't have the clearance to make judgment calls about that patient. You don't have the experience. And based on what I'm being told, you may have compromised a very controlled situation by establishing a rapport you had no business establishing." I checked his pulse. His IV was displaced. I resecured. "You touched him without authorization." "I'm his nurse." "You were his nurse," Simmons said, and his voice dropped to something cold and final. "Pack your badge. You're terminated." The word landed the way he intended it to, like a door being slammed. Ava stood very still. She was aware of everyone watching, everyone pretending not to watch. The specific, awful energy of a public humiliation in a space where you have to keep functioning, keep showing up, keep doing your job even after you've been told you no longer have one. "For checking a patient's pulse," she said. Her voice was steady. She made sure of that. "For insubordination and unauthorized engagement with a restricted patient," Simmons said. "HR will process your paperwork. Security will escort you out." He turned and walked away, and the hallway exhaled. Linda came to stand beside Ava. She didn't look at her. She looked straight ahead. "I'm sorry," she said very quietly. "There was nothing I could do." "It's fine," Ava said. "It's not." "I know." Ava unclipped her badge from her scrubs. "But it's fine anyway." A security guard named Marcus, who Ava had brought coffee twice and who had told her about his daughter's first steps on a slow Thursday night, came to walk her out. He looked miserable about it. She made it easier on him by moving first, by not making him ask. They walked down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past Linda's careful non-expression, past the two orderlies who had suddenly found the clipboard they were staring at very interesting, through the double doors, down the main corridor, past the waiting area where a woman was reading a magazine from 6 months ago and a child was sleeping across two chairs. They were almost at the front entrance when the front desk phone rang. The young receptionist, a woman named Priya, who was 22 and still startled by loud noises, picked it up with her professional greeting. And then something in her face changed. The professionalism didn't drop, but something behind it shifted. A confusion, a recognition of something being wrong in a way she didn't have the language for yet. Ava and Marcus were at the glass door. Ava pushed it open. "Wait," Priya called. Marcus turned. Ava paused. "I'm sorry," Priya said, holding the phone against her chest, her voice uncertain. "The call is, they're asking for the nurse, the one who was just..." She looked at Ava. "They said her name. They said Ava Calloway." Marcus looked at Ava. Ava looked at the phone. "Who is it?" Marcus asked. Priya swallowed. "They said they're calling from the Pentagon." The waiting room didn't stop. The woman kept reading her magazine. The child kept sleeping. The fluorescent lights kept flickering the way they always did. But everything in Ava's chest went very, very still. "Tell them," she said slowly, "that I'm here." Priya lifted the phone back to her ear with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "She's here," she said, and then she listened, and her face did something complicated. "They said," she looked at Ava again, "they said to keep her there. They said someone's already on the way." Marcus put his hand on Ava's arm, not to restrain her, the opposite, as if he was making sure she didn't disappear. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, his voice low. Ava looked back through the glass doors at the hallway she'd just been walked out of, at the double doors, at the wing beyond them where room 412 was sitting quiet and strange in the late morning. "I have some idea," she said. The double doors burst open at the far end of the corridor. Dr. Simmons appeared, moving faster than she had ever seen him move, his face a map of something between panic and anger, and he was holding a phone to his ear and talking fast and low in the way of a man who had just been told something he did not want to hear. He spotted her through the glass, stopped walking. They looked at each other through the doors. He moved toward her. She waited. The glass door swung open. "Calloway," he said, and his voice was different now, stripped of the authority, stripped of the performance, and what was underneath was something much more interesting, something much more human and much less comfortable. "I need you to..." "I was terminated," she said. "I'm not an employee of this hospital. You said so yourself." His jaw worked. "There's been a development?" she offered. He looked at her. She looked at him. The receptionist was watching with wide eyes. Marcus hadn't moved. "The man in 412, Simmons started. "The John Doe you admitted through the private entrance," Ava said. "The one with the thin chart and the unauthorized visitor you pretended not to notice." "How did you know about..." "You fired me for checking his pulse," she said. "Not because I did something wrong, because you were afraid of something you didn't understand. And now the Pentagon is calling, and suddenly you need me back, and you want to walk out here and act like the last 20 minutes didn't happen." The air between them was tight. Simmons looked like a man experiencing the specific misery of knowing he was wrong in a way that couldn't be undone or papered over. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to tell me what you know about that patient," she said. "Everything, right now, before whoever is coming through that door arrives." Simmons glanced toward the entrance. Outside, through the glass, a black SUV was pulling up to the curb, moving fast and then stopping with the smooth, controlled precision of someone who drove for a living. The doors opened and two people got out. A woman in a dark suit who moved with the efficiency of someone who hadn't broken into a run, but had never stopped being ready to. And a man in plain clothes who scanned the entrance before he walked through it. His eyes doing the same fast calculation Ava had seen in room 412 not 2 hours ago. "Tell me," Ava said again. Simmons exhaled. "He came in critical," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not dehydration. That was the cover. There was a medication involved. Something I wasn't given the name of. Just the counter agent. My instruction was to administer the counter agent on a schedule, monitor, and keep the room sealed. No nursing staff beyond standard vitals. No engagement. No documentation through normal channels." "Who gave you those instructions?" "A man I had never met before and whose ID I was told I could not photograph or retain," Simmons said. "He came in the evening before your shift and was gone before midnight." "And you complied," she said. "He showed me credentials I have never seen before and will never see again," Simmons said. "Yes, I complied." "Why did you fire me?" He looked at her, and for the first time, underneath all the performance and the authority and the barrel-chested certainty, she saw something honest. "Because when I looked at the footage from the room camera," he said, "I saw the way that patient looked at you, and it scared me." Before she could respond, the glass doors opened, and the woman in the dark suit walked straight to Ava with the energy of someone who has been briefed on exactly who they are looking for and has confirmed the match. "Ava Calloway?" she said. "That's me," Ava said. "My name is Agent Dana Reyes. I'm with the Department of Defense, attached to the Joint Special Operations Command Medical Liaison Division. We need to speak privately." Dr. Simmons took half a step forward. "I'm the director of this hospital. Anything relating to—" "Dr. Simmons," Dana Reyes said without looking at him. "You've been very helpful. We'll be in touch." The dismissal was so clean and so complete that Simmons actually took a step back. "Miss Calloway, if you'll come with me." Ava looked at Marcus. He was still holding her arm. She put her hand over his for a moment, briefly, the way you say something without saying it, and he released her. She walked with Dana Reyes toward the door. The man in plain clothes fell into step beside them. Outside, the second person from the SUV was standing near the vehicle, with his hands at his sides, and the relaxed alertness that Ava recognized and had been pretending for 8 months and 3 weeks and 4 days that she had left behind. "The patient in 412, Ava said as they reached the vehicle. "Yes," Dana said. "He's not dehydrated." "No. And the man who was in his room this morning was supposed to be there," Dana said. "That part checks out." She opened the rear door of the SUV and waited. Ava stood for a moment. She turned back, just once, and looked at the front of Mercy General Hospital. The sign above the entrance, the flickering lights through the glass, the shape of Dr. Simmons still standing in the lobby, looking like a man who had grabbed the wrong end of something and couldn't figure out how to let go. She thought about Linda Chen's careful non-expression. She thought about the way the patient in 412 had said she was fine, with the flat, simple certainty of a man who measured people quickly and was rarely wrong. She thought about the Grim Reaper tattoo, the 2 Latin words, the gray eyes that opened like a switch had been thrown. She got in the car. The door closed. The SUV pulled away from the curb. Dana Reyes opened a file on her lap and began to speak. "The man in room 412 is Colonel James Harlan Voss," she said. "Defense Intelligence Agency, Special Operations Division, active, classified status. He was brought to your hospital 3 days ago after a suspected poisoning during a covert operation he cannot discuss with you. The counter agent he's been receiving was correct, but something in the administration schedule was off, and his recovery has been slower than projected." "The chart said dehydration," Ava said. "The chart said what it needed to say. And you need me because in 4 hours of observation this morning," Dana said, looking up from the file, You identified two things his medical team missed: his irregular pulse pattern and the shifted IV catheter. Ava looked at her. The catheter was shifted 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters, Dana agreed, in a very specific direction, consistent with someone having introduced a secondary substance into the line. She let that sit. We don't think it was accidental. Ava heard what Dana was not saying, not the part about the catheter or the pulse or the counteragent, the part underneath all of it, the part that had been waiting, patient and quiet, since she first walked into room 412 and felt the air go wrong. There was someone else in that hospital, someone with access to a restricted room and a reason to slow Colonel Voss's recovery or stop it entirely. Someone who had done it carefully enough that the medical team had missed it. Someone who was, in all likelihood, still there. You need to go back, Ava said. We need you to go back, Dana said. With us, with a cover. Ava looked out the window. The hospital was already several blocks behind them. Doctor, Simmons fired me 40 minutes ago, she said. Dr. Simmons, Dana said, has already been on the phone with the Secretary of Defense's office. As of 10 minutes ago, you are reinstated with full privileges and a direct reporting line that bypasses the standard chain of command. She paused. He's also been instructed to apologize to you in person. Ava said nothing for a moment. She thought about what it would feel like to walk back through those doors, back down that hallway, back past Linda's careful eyes, and the orderlies in the nurses' station where she had been publicly humiliated 45 minutes ago. She thought about what Dr. Simmons's apology would look like, the performance of it, the discomfort, the way a man who had never been wrong in 11 years would try to package his wrongness into something manageable. And then she thought about Colonel Voss, lying in room 412 with gray eyes and a Grim Reaper tattoo and a compromised IV line, and someone in that hospital who knew exactly what they had done and was, at this very moment, deciding what to do next. Tell me everything you know, Ava said, all of it, before we get back. Dana Reyes looked at her for a moment, and then something in the careful, professional distance of her expression shifted, slightly, the way it does when someone decides to stop performing at you and start talking to you. That, she said, is exactly what Colonel Voss said you would say. The SUV moved through Alexandria traffic like it owned every lane, and Dana Reyes didn't waste a single minute of the drive. She opened the file on her lap, not the thin, sanitized version of events, but something thicker, tabbed with colored markers, photographs paper-clipped to typed reports. And she started talking the way people talk when they've been holding information too long and finally have the right person to give it to. Colonel Voss has been under deep cover for 11 months, she said. The operation doesn't have a name I'm authorized to share with you. What I can tell you is that 3 weeks ago, he made contact with an asset inside a foreign intelligence network. The meeting went wrong. He was exposed to a compound we've been seeing in targeted poisoning cases for the past 18 months. Slow-acting, odorless, designed to look like organ failure from natural causes. What compound? Ava asked. Modified organophosphate derivative, military grade, the kind that doesn't show up on a standard tox screen unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Ava was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, Alexandria moved past in the gray November morning. Who knows he's at Mercy General? Dana turned a page. Officially, 4 people in the DOD, 2 in the DIA, Dr. Simmons, and the pharmacy liaison who prepared the counteragent. She paused. Unofficially, that number is clearly higher than 4, which is why we're having this conversation. Because someone tampered with his line. Because someone tampered with his line, Dana confirmed. And the only person in that hospital this morning who noticed was a nurse who was supposed to be clearing out her locker. Ava looked at the file in Dana's hands. Can I see the photograph? Dana hesitated for exactly 1 second, then handed over a single photograph. It was a surveillance image, slightly grainy, of a man in a white coat moving through what appeared to be a hospital corridor. He had his head angled away from the camera. Deliberately. The angle was too consistent, too precise. He knew exactly where every camera was. "Who is he?" Ava asked. "We don't know yet," Dana said. "He was on the floor between 6 and 9 a.m. He accessed the restricted supply closet adjacent to room 412 using a badge that cleared security. The badge belonged to a pharmacist named Dr. Owen Garrett, who we confirmed was homesick with a stomach virus this morning and has not been to the hospital in 3 days. Someone cloned his access badge. Someone cloned his access badge, Dana said, and they did it clean enough that our system flagged nothing until 40 minutes ago when our tech team ran a secondary audit. The SUV slowed. Ava looked up. They were 2 blocks from the hospital. "What do you need from me?" Ava asked. "Voss's counter-agent schedule needs to be recalibrated. The compound in his system has metabolized differently than expected, and whoever adjusted his IV line this morning changed the absorption rate. Without recalibration, we're looking at organ stress within 6 to 8 hours." Dana closed the file. "The DIA has a medical team, but they can't be on site for another 3 hours. Every minute counts. And Voss, trust me," Ava said. Dana didn't confirm or deny it. She didn't have to. "He said I was fine," Ava said, almost to herself. "In the room when the other agent tried to send me out, Voss said I was fine." "He doesn't say that about people," Dana said quietly. "In 11 months, he hasn't cleared a single civilian. Not once." The SUV stopped. The man in plain clothes, Dana had not introduced him, and Ava had not asked, because she understood that sometimes the most important people in a room are the ones whose names you aren't given yet, got out first and scanned the entrance. Ava looked at the hospital doors. Through the glass, she could see the lobby. She could see the shape of Dr. Simmons standing near the front desk, talking to someone, his body language doing the complicated work of a man trying to appear calm while being very much the opposite. "One more question," Ava said. "Go ahead." "The man in the photograph, the one with the clone badge, you said he was on the floor between 6 and 9. I arrived at 7, which means he was there before me, during my time on the floor, and possibly after." She looked at Dana. "Is he still in the building?" Dana held her gaze. "We don't know." "Then we need to move fast," Ava said, and she got out of the car. 11:58 a.m. Walking back through those doors was one of the stranger things Ava had done in the last 2 years, and that was saying something. The lobby looked the same. The fluorescent lights flickered the same way. The woman with the old magazine was still there, though the child who had been sleeping was gone. Priya, at the front desk, looked up and went through 3 distinct expressions in under 2 seconds. Surprise, relief, and a complicated guilt that said she'd been worrying about her role in the whole thing. Dr. Simmons moved toward Ava before she had taken 4 steps inside. He looked like he'd aged 6 years in the past 40 minutes. His face was doing something difficult. The performance of authority was still there, the muscle memory of it, but underneath it was a man who had just been on the phone with people whose names made his palms sweat. "Calloway," he said. "Dr. Simmons," she said, and kept walking. He fell into step beside her, dropping his voice. "I was told to. There's apparently been a misunderstanding about the nature of—" "You grabbed my wrist and threw my badge on the floor," Ava said without slowing down. "In front of your entire staff." He opened his mouth, closed it. "You said you'd make sure I never worked in any hospital in this country again." She pushed through the double doors into the East Wing corridor. "I'm not going to stand here and let you turn that into a misunderstanding. It happened. We're both going to know it happened for the rest of our professional careers. Now." She stopped and turned to face him. "I need everything you know about who has had access to room 412 since Colonel Voss was admitted. Every person, every time, every reason." Simmons stared at her. The authority had fully vacated his expression now. What was left was something raw and frightened. And underneath all of that, something Ava recognized as the look of a man who had stepped in far over his head and knew it. "There was a technician," he said, "yesterday evening, for the IV equipment. Routine maintenance check. I thought nothing of it at the time. Name? On the badge it said," he rubbed his forehead, "Rodriguez, Miguel Rodriguez, biomedical equipment." Ava looked at Dana, who had come through the double doors behind her. Dana's expression confirmed what Ava already suspected. "We have no Miguel Rodriguez in biomedical equipment on today's roster," Dana said. The air in the corridor went tight. 12:07 p.m. Linda Chen was at the nurse's station when Ava came around the corner, and the look on Linda's face was so compressed with conflicted emotion, relief and guilt, and professional stoicism, all fighting for the same square inch of expression, that Ava almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I need your access logs," Ava said. "Every entry to 412 from the time of admission to right now. Full records, not the summary." "Ava, Linda." Ava put both hands on the counter and looked at her directly. I know you were told not to ask questions. I know you were in a position that wasn't fair to you. We can have that conversation later. Right now, I need the logs." Linda pulled up the records without another word. Ava scanned them quickly. 7 entries in 40 hours. Dr. Simmons, the overnight nurse on admission. 3 entries from Ava herself that morning. 1 from an agent whose name appeared in the system as a physician on temporary privileges, and 1 entry at 9:42 p.m. the previous evening, logged under the biomedical department, duration 18 minutes. 18 minutes for routine IV equipment maintenance. "Who authorized that entry?" Ava asked. Linda leaned in. Her face changed. That's logged under Dr. Simmons's authorization code." Simmons, standing 4 feet away, looked at the screen. "I didn't authorize that," he said. The certainty in his voice was absolute and real and afraid. "I have never seen that entry before." 12:14 p.m. Dana was already on her phone. The man in plain clothes, Ava had privately started calling him Gray because of the gray jacket he wore with the wrong shoulder weight, had disappeared down the south corridor with a speed and silence that confirmed everything she'd already assessed about him. Ava went to room 412. She knocked, opened the door. Voss was awake, sitting up the same way she'd found him that morning, the same controlled stillness, but his color was worse. There was a tightness around his jaw that hadn't been there before, and his breathing was slightly shallower. Not dramatic, not alarming to someone who didn't know what to look for, but Ava knew exactly what to look for. "You came back," he said. "They reinstated me." She moved to the bed and reached for his wrist. His pulse was faster, more irregular. "How long has your chest been tight?" He looked at her. "Don't," she said. "Don't do the thing where you decide I don't need to know. Your line was tampered with this morning. The compound in your system is metabolizing faster than projected. How long has your chest been tight?" A pause. "Since about 10 a.m., he said. "Did you tell anyone?" Another pause. Longer. "Voss." "I was monitoring it," he said. "You were monitoring your own organ function," she said flatly, "while someone was actively trying to kill you inside this hospital. I'm aware of the situation. Then act like it and talk to me." She was already reaching for the IV line, examining the port, the connection, the entire administration set with the focused attention of someone looking for something very specific. "The man who tampered with your line used a clone badge to access the supply closet adjacent to your room. He was in this hospital for at least 3 hours. We don't know if he's still here." Voss said nothing for a moment, then, "The technician, last night. You noticed him." "I notice everyone." "But you didn't flag it." "I flagged it through my own channels," he said. "I sent a communication at 10:17 last night. I was told it was received." Ava stopped what she was doing and looked at him. "It wasn't," she said, Dana received nothing until this morning. The gray eyes went very still. Say that again. Your communication at 10:17 last night was either intercepted or suppressed. Dana had no knowledge of a potential compromise until the IV issue was flagged this morning She stopped. After you were fired, he said. Yes. And then the Pentagon called. Yes. He leaned back against the pillow, and for a moment, the controlled stillness cracked slightly, and what came through wasn't fear. It wasn't anything as simple as fear, but it was something in the same family, a recognition. The specific internal recalibration of a trained person discovering that the threat is closer and more embedded than they had assessed. There's a leak, he said. Not outside, inside. That's what it looks like, Ava said, which means the man with the clone badge didn't come in blind. He was sent by someone who knew exactly where I was, exactly which room, and exactly how to move through this hospital without triggering the standard alerts. He looked at her. How many people knew you were being taken off the floor this morning? She thought about it. Simmons, Linda, the pharmacy liaison. And whoever Simmons talked to before he fired you, Voss said, did he make any calls between the time he reviewed the room footage and the time he came to the nurse's station? 12:31 p.m. Simmons, when Ava asked him directly in the corridor outside room 412, looked like a man who had been waiting for this question with something between dread and relief. I called Dr. Reginald Voss, he said, senior department head. I call him whenever there's a gray area situation. He has connections to federal health oversight. I thought, who is Reginald Voss? Dana was standing 3 feet away, already typing on her phone. He's been on staff here for 9 years, Simmons said. He handles compliance, federal coordination, patient privacy protocols for sensitive. Dana looked up from her phone. Her face had done something controlled and precise, the way a person's face does when they have just confirmed something they were hoping not to confirm. There is no Reginald Voss in the Federal Health Oversight Database, she said. There is no licensed physician by that name registered in the state of Virginia. There is no Reginald Voss in any of the 3 databases I just cross-referenced. The silence in the corridor was the kind that has weight. Simmons made a sound that wasn't quite a word. He put one hand against the wall. He's been here for 9 years, he said, and his voice had gone thin and unsteady. I've had lunch with him. I've been to his office. He has a... What floor? Dana said. Third floor, East Suite, room 312. Gray was already moving. 12:38 p.m., Ava stayed with Voss. Not because she was told to stay, and not because she was afraid of what was happening on the 3rd floor, but because the practical truth was that Voss needed the counteragent recalibrated in the next 40 minutes, and he was the one person in this situation whose outcome she could directly affect. She worked efficiently, adjusting the drip rate, flushing the line thoroughly before reconnecting, monitoring his response. His breathing was still shallow, but it hadn't worsened in the 7 minutes she'd been in the room, which meant the contamination in the line hadn't yet pushed the compound concentration past the threshold. You were military, Voss said, not a question. I was a lot of things, she said, without looking up from the IV port. Combat medic, he said. Forward operating conditions. You have the hands for it and the read speed for it. A beat. And you're not afraid in here. Most people are afraid in here right now. Most people don't know enough to be the right kind of afraid, she said. What's the right kind? Focused. She finished the adjustment and checked the flow rate. You can be afraid later. Right now you have to be useful. He almost smiled. It didn't make it all the way to an actual smile, but the intention was there. What was your unit? She looked at him, and she made a decision, not a reckless one, not an emotional one, but the kind of decision you make when you've assessed a situation completely and concluded that honesty is the most strategically sound option. If I tell you that, she said, Then we both know things about each other that complicate this situation in ways neither of us wants to deal with right now. Fair, he said. What I can tell you is that I've seen this compound before, not in the same configuration, but the base compound, 18 months ago. And the person who used it then was... The door opened. Dana came in, her face carrying the compressed energy of someone who has just run up a flight of stairs and is professionally committed to looking like they didn't. Room 312, she said. And, Ava said, empty, completely cleared, not just vacated, professionally sanitized. No prints, no personal items, no digital footprint on the hospital network beyond a username login that traces back to a server we can't locate domestically. She looked at Voss. Voss, whatever his real name is, has been in this hospital for 9 years. He's been embedded here since before your operation was even in the planning stage. The room went quiet in a different way than before. Not the silence of shock. Shock was too simple, too reactive. This was the silence of people absorbing the implications of something large and patient and very well planned. He wasn't here for me, Voss said slowly. No, Dana agreed. He was here waiting for you, which means someone knew a long time ago that this hospital would eventually be used for an operation like this one. They placed him here years in advance. She paused. This wasn't reactive. This was anticipatory. 1:02 p.m. The next 20 minutes moved in layers. On the surface, Mercy General Hospital was a functioning civilian medical facility in the middle of a Tuesday. Patients were being treated, charts were being updated, a surgery was happening in OR3 that had nothing to do with any of this. Underneath the surface, Gray and two people Ava had not seen before were moving through the building with the systematic efficiency of people who had done this in harder environments than a hospital in Alexandria. They were looking for Voss, for the man with the clone badge, for any secondary access point, any communication device, anything left behind. And at the center of it, in room 412, Ava was watching Voss's vitals with one eye and processing everything she knew with the other. And the thing that kept surfacing, the thing she kept turning over, was what she had started to say to Dana before the door opened. She had seen this compound before, 18 months ago. The operation she didn't talk about, the one that had sent her here, to this hospital, to this civilian life with its counted days and its pinned-back hair and its fluorescent lights that flickered. You were going to say something, Voss said. His voice was steadier now. The counteragent adjustment was working. His color had improved by a measurable degree. I was, she said, about the compound. Yes. And then Dana came in. Yes. She checked his pulse. 54, more regular. Your heart rate is improving. Ava. He said her name the way people say it when they are not going to be redirected. The compound, 18 months ago. Tell me. She sat down in the chair beside the bed, not because she needed to sit, but because what she was about to say was the kind of thing that should be said at the same level, not standing over someone. 18 months ago, she said, I was part of a 3-person tactical medical team attached to a classified extraction operation in Central Asia. We lost one of the 3 people to what was documented as cardiac failure. He was 27 years old, no prior cardiac history, in peak physical condition. She kept her voice even and clinical. It was the only way she could say it at all. I flagged the symptom presentation to the debrief team. I told them the progression was inconsistent with spontaneous cardiac failure. I told them I recognized a specific pattern of organ response that I had seen in a training document about targeted chemical agents. She looked at Voss. I was told that my assessment was outside my scope of competence and that the cause of death had been officially determined. And you pushed back, Voss said, not a question. I pushed back, she said, and 2 weeks later I was discharged. Honorably, technically, but discharged. Voss held her gaze for a long moment. Something was happening behind those gray eyes. A calculation, a connection, the particular internal movement of a person who has just received a piece of information that rearranges other pieces they've been carrying. "What was his name?" Voss asked. "The person you lost." She looked at him steadily. "His name was Daniel Cho, Sergeant First Class. He was from Honolulu. He had a daughter he'd never met because she was born during his first deployment, and he was supposed to go home to her after the extraction." Voss said nothing for a long moment. Then, "I know that name." "I thought you might," Ava said. "Daniel Cho's death was flagged in a DIA internal investigation 8 months ago," Voss said. His voice had gone quieter, more precise. "The investigation was opened by someone inside the agency who believed his death was not incidental but deliberate. The same compound, the same profile." He looked at her. "That investigation is why I was in Central Asia 11 months ago. That investigation is why I made contact with the asset 3 weeks ago. And that investigation," he said, "is exactly why someone put a man in this hospital 9 years ago and waited." The door opened again, and this time it was Gray. He came in without preamble, the way people come in when they have found something, and the finding of it has not made anything better. "We found a device," he said. "Secondary transmitter, planted behind the utility panel in the supply closet adjacent to this room. It's been active. We can't determine the transmission window, but based on the battery state..." "He knows we found him," Ava said. "Yes," Gray said. "Which means he knows the investigation is compromised," Voss said. "Yes," Gray said again. He looked at Ava. "And based on the transmission frequency pattern, the device wasn't just broadcasting Voss's condition. It was transmitting conversation audio." He paused. "From this room." The three of them sat with that for a second. Ava thought about every conversation she'd had in room 412 that morning. The vitals, the pulse, the shifted catheter, and the conversation she just had with Voss, Daniel Cho, the investigation, the compound, the connection between her discharge and the operation that had sent Voss undercover for 11 months. All of it, broadcast to someone who was now in the wind. "How long ago did the transmission stop?" Ava asked. 14 minutes, Gray said. 14 minutes. While she had been adjusting the IV and talking about things she hadn't said out loud in 2 years. She stood up. She looked at Voss. "Your vitals are stabilizing. The recalibrated drip rate should hold until the DIA medical team arrives." She moved toward the door. "Ava," Voss said. She stopped. "Whatever you think you're about to do," he said, "you should know that you are not cleared for field operations. You are a reinstated civilian nurse under DoD protective umbrella. The authorized response chain does not include you." She turned to look at him. He was watching her with those flat gray eyes and the particular expression of a man who knows exactly what he's saying and exactly how much it will or will not matter. "The authorized response chain," she said, "also didn't notice the shifted catheter." He held her gaze. And then he did something she hadn't expected. He reached forward and picked up the call button from the bedside table and held it out to her. It took her a moment to understand that he wasn't handing it to her to call for a nurse. He was handing it to her because it was the only thing within reach, and he was a man who, when he had decided to trust someone, trusted them all the way. She took it. She put it in her pocket. Gray was watching this exchange with the careful, neutral expression of someone who is going to need to write a report about it later and is already thinking about which parts to leave out. "The South Service Corridor," Gray said quietly. "If he's still in the building, that's the only unmonitored exit. Cameras have been cycling on a loop in that section since 9 this morning." "I know," Ava said. "How do you know that?" he asked. She looked at him. "Because when I was being walked out of the building at 11:40, I noticed the timestamp on the South Corridor display was off by 2 hours and 12 minutes. She moved to the door. "I counted." The South Service Corridor was the kind of place a hospital pretended didn't exist. Not on the visitor maps, not on the directory by the elevators. Just a long stretch of utility space between the East Wing and the loading dock, used by maintenance crews and supply deliveries, and the occasional staff member who wanted to get from one end of the building to the other without walking through the lobby. It smelled like industrial cleaner and recycled air, and the lights were the buzzing, fluorescent kind that gave everything a slight greenish cast that made people look slightly wrong. Ava moved through it quickly and quietly, the call button from Voss's bedside in her left jacket pocket, her right hand free. She wasn't running. Running in a hospital attracted attention, and attention was the last thing she needed in the next 4 minutes. She walked the way she had learned to walk in conditions that did not permit noise or visibility, heel to toe, weight distributed, arms controlled, eyes moving in the pattern that covered all angles without the sweeping head movement that telegraphed alertness. She had been walking like this for 2 years, in parking lots and grocery stores and the hallways of Mercy General, and nobody had ever noticed, because nobody was looking for it. Gray had said the South Corridor cameras were looping since 9 a.m. That was 4 hours of unmonitored space in a building that was otherwise comprehensively watched. 4 hours was not a coincidence. That kind of loop required access to the hospital's security system at a level above the standard maintenance tier, which meant Voss, whoever Voss actually was, had not been working alone inside this building. He had infrastructure. He had support. He had been for 9 years building something inside Mercy General with the patience of a man who understood that the most dangerous operations are the ones nobody sees coming. She reached the junction where the service corridor split, left toward the loading dock, right toward the maintenance utility rooms. She stopped, listened. Footsteps. To the right, not running, measured. Someone trying to be quiet who was just slightly less practiced at it than she was. She went right. 1:12 p.m. The utility room door at the end of the right branch was slightly ajar. Not fully open, not closed. The specific position of a door that someone has passed through in a hurry and not bothered to fully pull behind them. Ava flattened her back against the wall beside the doorframe and listened again. Inside the room, someone was moving with controlled urgency. The sound of something heavy being shifted. A zipper. The electronic click of something being powered down. She pushed the door open with her foot and went through it in one motion. The man inside had his back to her. He was in civilian clothes, dark jacket, dark pants, nothing that screamed anything. And he was crouched over an open bag on the floor, packing equipment with the efficiency of someone who had done this before, who had a very clear picture of how much time he had and was working precisely within it. He heard her and came up fast, turning, and for half a second they were both perfectly still, assessing. He was not Miguel Rodriguez. He was not the blurry figure from the surveillance photograph. He was someone she had seen before, in a context that took her brain exactly 3 seconds to locate, and when it did, something cold moved through her chest. "Ava Calloway," he said. His voice was level, almost conversational. "I didn't expect you to find this corridor." "Clearly," she said. His name was Thomas Wick. She had last seen him 14 months ago at a DoD medical briefing she had attended in a capacity she was not supposed to discuss. He had been introduced as a senior analyst from the Defense Health Agency. He had asked smart questions and shaken hands with everyone in the room, and had the kind of forgettable face that she now understood was not accidental. "You're not with the Defense Health Agency," she said. "I'm with several things," he said, none of them particularly relevant to this conversation. "You tampered with Voss's IV line." He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. He just looked at her with the calm of a man running calculations. "The transmitter in the supply closet," she said. "You've been listening to everything, which means you heard the conversation about Daniel Cho." Something moved behind his eyes, just briefly. "Daniel Cho was a casualty of an operation that was managed incorrectly," he said. "The people responsible have been identified and..." He was poisoned, Ava said, with the same compound that's in Voss's system right now. And you know that because you're the one who knows which compound it is, because you're the one who put it there both times. The calculation behind his eyes finished running. He moved. 1:14 p.m. He was faster than she expected, which meant he was better trained than his Defense Health Agency cover suggested, which should not have surprised her but did, for approximately 1 second. He closed the distance between them in 2 steps, going for her right arm, trying to control her dominant hand, textbook response to a single, unarmed subject in a confined space. She was already moving left when he committed to the right. She let him catch her forearm. Let him, because his grip on her arm pulled him forward and slightly off balance, and drove her elbow back into his solar plexus with the compact, economical force of someone who had practiced this in conditions where getting it wrong meant not coming home. He went back hard, hit the shelving unit behind him. Metal items clattered. He recovered faster than most people would have, which confirmed everything she was now certain about him. "Stop," she said. Her voice was completely flat. "You're in a hospital. There are 3 federal agents in this building right now, and 2 more are on the way. There is no version of the next 5 minutes where you walk out of here. Stop." He was breathing harder now, his hand pressed to his sternum where she'd hit him. He looked at her with an expression that was, for the first time, something she could actually read. Not calm, not calculated, but the specific look of a man who has run out of good options and is auditing his bad ones. "The investigation Voss is running," he said. "You don't understand what you're protecting." "Tell me what I'm protecting," she said. "An operation that goes further up than Voss knows, further up than Dana Reyes knows. If Voss completes this investigation, if he delivers what he found in Central Asia, people with significant institutional power are going to lose everything." He said it plainly, not dramatically, the way you state a fact. "And those people are not going to allow that. So your solution was to kill a colonel in a civilian hospital and frame it as organ failure," she said. "My solution was to delay the investigation long enough for a different solution to be implemented," he said. "Nobody was supposed to notice the catheter. Nobody was supposed to—" He stopped. "Nobody was supposed to notice," she said. And then a rookie nurse checked a pulse. 1:19 p.m. Gray came through the door 40 seconds after Ava sent the signal. 3 presses of the call button in her pocket, which she and Gray had established in approximately 12 words before she left room 412. Because people who have worked in certain environments establish signals fast and without discussion. He came in with 1 other agent behind him, and Thomas Wick, who had been standing very still with his hands visible, went to his knees without being told. Ava stepped back. Her heart rate was elevated, she could feel it, but her hands were steady. They were always steady. Gray looked at Wick, then at Ava, then at the bag on the floor, which was full of equipment that Gray recognized immediately because he crouched down beside it with the focused attention of a person confirming something they had already suspected. "Secondary transmitter," he said. "Encrypted relay. This goes to an external receiver, not a local hub." He looked up. This wasn't just monitoring Voss. This was feeding to someone outside the building in real time. "He said the investigation goes further up than Voss knows," Ava said. Gray stood up. He looked at Wick with an expression that was professionally neutral, in the way that some expressions are professionally neutral, specifically to conceal the fact that they are not neutral at all. "Who are you reporting to?" Gray asked. Wick said nothing. "The device," Gray said. "External receiver, where is it?" Wick said nothing. Gray looked at Ava. Not for instruction, he wasn't asking her what to do, but with the look of a person who has just confirmed an assessment they'd been forming all morning. "Get back to Voss," he said quietly. "The DIA medical team lands in 90 minutes. I need you with him until they arrive." Wick said people with institutional power are going to lose everything if the investigation completes, Ava said. Which means the leak isn't just Voss. Voss was the placement. Wick was the operator. But whoever they're reporting to is still out there, Gray said. I know. He looked at her steadily. Go back to Voss. And Ava, do not tell him what Wick said until I'm in the room. She wanted to ask why. She looked at his face and decided not to. 1:34 p.m. Voss knew the moment she walked in. Not because she told him anything. Not because her expression gave anything away. She was careful about that. Had been careful about that for years. He knew because he was the kind of person who read the space between what someone said and how they were holding their shoulders when they said it. You found him, Voss said. Gray has him, she said. You found him yourself first, Voss said, before Gray. She checked his vitals without responding to that. Pulse 51, much more regular. Blood pressure coming back into range. The recalibrated drip was working. His name is Thomas Wick, she said. He was at a Defense Health Agency briefing 14 months ago. I saw him there. Voss went still in the way she had come to recognize. Not the sleep stillness of his admission, but the active stillness of a mind processing fast. Wick, he said, not a question, not quite recognition either, something in between. You know him? I know the name from a document, Voss said carefully. A document that is part of the investigation. His name appears in a communication chain from 22 months ago. In a context I couldn't fully explain at the time. He looked at her. He's not Defense Health Agency. No, she said, he's not. What did he say to you? She hesitated. She heard Gray's voice in her head. Do not tell him until I'm in the room. She thought about why Gray would say that, and she thought about what it meant that Gray would say that at all. Because the only reason to hold information back from Voss was if the information was the kind that would cause Voss to do something before Gray was ready for him to do it. He said the investigation goes further up than you know, she said. She was not going to be dishonest with a man whose life she'd spent the morning keeping intact. He said people with significant institutional power are going to lose everything if you complete it. Voss's jaw tightened. He said that. Those were his words, almost exactly. And Gray told you not to tell me until he was present. Yes, because Gray knows whose name is at the top of that chain, Voss said. His voice had gone very quiet. The quietest she had heard it, and he knows how I'll respond when I hear it. The room felt different suddenly, not smaller, not darker, but weighted, the way a room gets when the thing that's been circling finally lands. Voss, she said. I'm all right, he said, but it was the kind of all right that meant something specific, not fine, not calm, but held together with the particular discipline of a man who has decided that whatever he's feeling, this is not the moment for it. 1:47 p.m. Dana came in 7 minutes before Gray, and she came in with the compressed energy of someone who had received news in the last 10 minutes that had restructured everything. The external receiver, she said without preamble. Wick's transmitter was feeding to a relay point 3 blocks from this building. We have the location. We also have a partial transmission log. She set a tablet on the bed beside Voss. The last complete transmission was at 1:03 p.m., 14 minutes before Gray found the device. The conversation in this room, Ava said. Yes, Dana's voice was careful in a way that meant she was about to say something significant. The transmission captured the full conversation between you and Voss about Daniel Cho, the compound, the investigation timeline, and... She stopped. And what? Voss asked. And your current physical condition, your vitals, the recalibration schedule. She looked at him directly. Whoever received that transmission knows exactly how compromised your system is right now. They know the DIA medical team is 90 minutes out. They know the counter-agent recalibration window. Voss understood immediately. Ava understood 1 second after him. They know he's vulnerable, Ava said, and they know exactly how long the window is. 90 minutes, Dana said, which means if they're going to act, they act in the next. The overhead lights went out, not flickered, not dimmed, out. The entire east wing went black for 4 full seconds before the emergency generators kicked in and the backup lighting came on. The red-tinted emergency strips along the floor and the single ceiling lamp on auxiliary power that turned everything in the room into shadows and hard angles. Nobody moved. Then Voss said very quietly, "That wasn't a power failure." "No," Dana said. She already had her phone to her ear. "Gray, east wing is dark. Tell me you're seeing this." A pause. "What do you mean the security panel is gray? Gray?" She lowered the phone. "I've lost him." 1:52 p.m. The next 4 minutes were the longest of Ava's recent memory, and her recent memory included some long minutes. Dana positioned herself at the door. Ava stayed at Voss's bedside. The auxiliary power kept the IV pump running. She checked it immediately, checked the line again, checked the port. Everything intact. Whatever was happening in the east wing, whoever had cut the power, they hadn't touched the room yet. "The DIA team," Ava said to Dana, her voice low. "Can you accelerate their arrival?" "I've been trying to reach my contact for the last 3 minutes," Dana said. "Try a different contact." "I have 2 contacts on this operation. One is Gray, who is currently not responding. The other is on the incoming team." Ava looked at Voss. He was watching the door with the flat, ready attention of a man who had spent 11 months operating in places where the lights going out meant something specific and immediate. He was also, she noted with the clinical part of her mind that never fully stopped running, paler than he had been 15 minutes ago. The stress response was pulling on a system that was already stretched. "Lie back," she said. "I'm fine. Your pressure is going to spike if you stay in that position. Lie back. If someone comes through that door, you being upright isn't going to change the outcome, and it might crash your system." He looked at her with those gray eyes and the expression of a man who was not accustomed to being told what to do in a threat scenario. Then he lay back. "There's a secondary entrance to this room," he said, "through the connecting bathroom. It accesses the room next door, which is currently unoccupied. That's the approach I'd use." Dana moved toward the bathroom door without being asked and put her back to the wall beside it. They waited. The emergency lighting hummed. Somewhere in the east wing, an alarm was going. Not the full evacuation alarm, but a lower, more localized sound, the kind that said something was wrong in a specific system rather than the whole building. Ava's hand was in her jacket pocket. Her fingers were on the call button. Then her phone buzzed. Not a call, a text, from a number she didn't recognize. 3 words. "Supply room. Now." She looked at it. She looked at Voss. "Someone just texted me from an unknown number. 3 words. Supply room. Now." "Don't go," Dana said immediately, from beside the bathroom door. "It's not an instruction," Ava said slowly. "It's a location." She looked at the text again. "Someone is telling me where they are, not where to go." "That's a fine distinction to make in a dark hospital," Dana said. "It's the supply room adjacent to this room," Ava said. "The one where the transmitter was planted. The one with the cloned badge access." She looked at Voss. "Whoever sent this is already in the building, already in position, and they're telling me they're there." "Or they're drawing you out of this room," Dana said. "If they wanted me out of this room, they'd have sent a text that made me want to leave," Ava said. "This doesn't ask me to do anything. It just says where they are." 2:01 p.m. She went into the supply room through the connecting door, the one that ran between Voss's room and the adjacent space, which Voss had unlocked from the panel beside his bed using an access code that he definitely was not supposed to have, and that she was going to need him to explain at some point. The supply room was small, shelving on 3 walls, medical equipment in sealed packaging, IV supplies, monitoring gear. The emergency lighting was on, same red-tinted strips, same hard shadows. A man was standing with his back to the shelving, his hands visible, his posture completely non-threatening in the deliberate way of a person who wants you to understand immediately that they are not a threat. He was older than she expected, mid-60s, gray at the temples, wearing civilian clothes that were expensive in a quiet, understated way. His face was one of those faces that looked like it had been arranged specifically to convey trustworthiness, which meant she trusted it approximately not at all. "Ms. Calloway," he said. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he said, "but you know my name. You've known it for 22 months, even if you didn't know you knew it." He paused. It appeared in the debrief documents from Daniel Cho's operation, buried in the authorization chain, one level above the mission commander. She felt the cold thing move through her chest again. "You authorized that operation." "I authorized the mission," he said. "I did not authorize what happened to Sergeant Cho." "Someone used that authorization chain to move Wick into a position where he could—" "Yes," he said. "Someone used my name, my clearance, and my operational signature to enable what happened to Cho and what is happening to Voss right now." His eyes were steady and utterly serious. "That is why I am standing in the supply room with my hands visible, in a dark hospital, talking to a nurse who I believe is the only person in this building I can trust with what I'm about to say." She looked at him for a long moment. The calculation wasn't simple. Everything he'd said could be true, or it could be constructed specifically to sound true to someone with her background and her particular vulnerabilities. "Why me?" she said. "Because you've been watching this from the outside for 22 months, he said. "Because you flagged Cho's death when everyone told you to let it go. Because you got fired this morning for checking a pulse and came back anyway." He looked at her with an expression that was, under all the composure, something tired and long-carrying. "And because Voss cleared you. In 11 months, he has never cleared a civilian, which means he already assessed you the way I'm assessing you right now, and he reached the same conclusion." "What conclusion?" "That you're the only person in this situation with no institutional loyalty to protect," he said. "No chain of command, no career to guard, no reason to bury the truth." He reached into his jacket, slowly showing her the motion, and produced a single USB drive. This contains the complete authorization chain for Cho's operation. The original documents, unredacted, including the name of the person who used my credentials to run Wick, to place Voss in this hospital, and to order both Cho's death and the attempt on Voss. He held it out. "I've been trying to get this to the right person for 14 months. I've watched 3 attempts fail because the chain of custody was compromised before the evidence could be delivered." She looked at the drive. She did not take it yet. "Who is it?" she said. "The name at the top," he told her. She knew the name. Everyone in the country knew the name. And the knowing of it, the hearing of it said out loud in a supply room in a dark hospital, was the specific, nauseating sensation of something you had suspected being confirmed in a way that removed every last possibility of doubt. Her hand was steady when she reached out and took the drive. 2:09 p.m. The lights came back on, not gradually, not in stages. All at once, the full east wing, fluorescent and complete, flooding everything back into normal visibility like a curtain going up. In the supply room, both Ava and the older man blinked in the sudden brightness, and for a moment, they were just 2 people standing in a very ordinary hospital storage room, and the extraordinary weight of the last 4 minutes sat between them like a third presence. "Who are you?" she asked. It seemed important to know, finally. "My name is Arthur Gale," he said. "I held a position I'm no longer going to name for 19 years before I understood what was being done with it." He looked at the drive in her hand. "I've been building that for 14 months. Please don't let it end up in a drawer somewhere." "It won't," she said. She went back through the connecting door to Voss's room. Dana was still at the bathroom wall, her posture slightly less coiled now that the lights were back. Voss was still in the bed. Both of them looked at her when she came in. She held up the USB drive. Voss looked at it. Something happened in his face. Not quite relief, not quite anything that had a simple name, but the complex, bone-deep release of someone who has been carrying something enormous for a very long time and has just seen solid ground. "Who?" Dana said. Ava told her the name. Dana sat down on the edge of the chair beside the bed. She put both hands over her face for a moment. Just a moment. Then she took them away and she was professional again. But it had cost her something, and they all understood that. "Voss," Dana said. Her voice was controlled but stripped of all the bureaucratic insulation. "This is going to be the kind of thing that doesn't come back from." "No," Voss said, "it's not. Your career is built on the premise that the truth matters," Voss said. He was looking at Ava, not Dana. "If I'm wrong about that, then none of the rest of it means anything either." Gray appeared in the doorway. He was breathing faster than his composure wanted to admit, and there was a mark on his forearm that suggested the last 20 minutes had not been entirely procedural. He looked at the drive in Ava's hand. He looked at Voss. He looked at Dana's face. "I missed something," he said. "Several things," Dana said. "Get in here. Close the door." Through the window of room 412, the east wing of Mercy General Hospital looked exactly like it always looked. The movement of staff, the distant sound of a cart being wheeled, the ordinary rhythm of a place whose purpose was to keep people alive. Nothing on the surface to indicate what had just shifted, irrevocably and completely, within those walls. Ava set the USB drive on the bedside table beside Voss. She checked his pulse. 49, steady, the steadiest it had been all day, and she noted it on her tablet with the same careful precision she applied to everything. "You should know," Voss said quietly, while Dana and Gray talked in low, urgent voices across the room, "that when this is over, the formal investigation, the chain of custody, all of it, Daniel Cho's daughter is going to know what happened to her father." Ava kept her eyes on the tablet. Her throat tightened in a way she didn't allow to reach her voice. "She's 3 years old," she said. "She'll grow up," Voss said, "and when she's old enough to ask, she'll have an answer that's true." He paused. "Because you counted days in a hospital and checked a pulse when you weren't supposed to." She finished the vitals notation. She set the tablet down, and she allowed herself for exactly 3 seconds to feel the full weight of 22 months of being told she was wrong. Then she picked the tablet back up, because there was still work to do. The DIA medical team was no longer 90 minutes out. Dana had made 4 calls in 6 minutes, and somewhere in those calls a timeline had been compressed with the kind of urgency that required authorization from people whose names didn't appear on publicly available organizational charts. The new estimate was 40 minutes, which meant Ava had 40 minutes to keep Voss stable, keep the USB drive secure, and figure out what to do about the fact that Arthur Gale was still sitting in the supply room next door, with no protective detail and the full knowledge of a name that could bring down an infrastructure 20 years in the making. She went back through the connecting door at 217 and found Gale exactly where she'd left him, standing with the patient stillness of a man who had been waiting for a very long time and had made his peace with waiting. "You need to be in Voss's room," she said, "under Dana's protection." "I'm not sure Dana's chain of command is entirely clean," Gale said. Not accusatory, flat, factual. Ava looked at him. "Explain that." "The operation that placed Voss in this hospital 9 years ago required ongoing institutional cover," he said. "Budget lines, clearance renewals, facility access updates. Someone in the DoD Medical Liaison Division has been maintaining that cover. That division is Dana Reyes's division." The cold thing moved through Ava's chest again. "You're saying Dana..." "I'm saying Dana may have people above her who are compromised," Gale said carefully. "I am not saying Dana herself is. There's a meaningful difference. But until the chain of authorization for Voss's placement is fully traced, I would not put all of your trust in any single institutional actor. Ava stood in the doorway between the supply room and the connecting passage and felt the specific, nauseating difficulty of a situation where you couldn't fully trust anyone and you still had to act. "Who do you trust?" she asked. Gale looked at her steadily. "You," he said, "and Voss. For the same reason I trusted you enough to walk into this building today." He paused. "You don't have anything to protect except the truth. In my experience, that is an extraordinarily rare quality in people who operate near classified operations." "I'm a reinstated civilian nurse on a DoD protective umbrella," she said. "Yes," he said, "and 3 hours ago you were a fired rookie who noticed a 2 millimeter shift in an IV catheter." He tilted his head slightly. "Context is a flexible thing, Ms. Calloway." She made a decision. "Stay here. Lock the connecting door from your side. Don't open it for anyone except me or Voss himself." "Voss can't walk right now," Gale said. "Then don't open it for anyone," she said. 2:24 p.m. Back in room 412, Gray had spread a physical document across the foot of Voss's bed. A printed floor schematic of the East Wing, something he'd pulled from the hospital's facilities management office with an authority that had apparently not required much explanation. He was marking access points with a pen, and the focused efficiency of the movement told Ava that whatever had happened to Gray in the East Wing during the blackout, he had processed it and filed it and was operating on the other side of it. "Wick is secure," he said without looking up. "2 of my people have him in the administration office on the 2nd floor. He's not talking, but we have the bag from the utility room, and our tech team is 40 minutes out to work the transmitter." He marked another point on the schematic. "The relay receiver 3 blocks out. I have a local field contact moving on it right now." "Gale says someone in the DoD Medical Liaison Division has been maintaining Voss's institutional cover," Ava said. Gray's pen stopped. He looked up. "Gale is the man in the supply room." "Yes." "How do you assess him?" She thought about it honestly. "He's either exactly what he says he is, a senior official who's been trying to route compromised evidence to a trustworthy recipient for 14 months, or he is the most sophisticated deception I've encountered in a context where I've encountered several." She paused. "His read on the situation matches everything we've independently confirmed. The placement timeline, the compound profile, the authorization chain. He knew things that weren't in any document Wick could have briefed him on, or things he put in those documents himself," Dana said from the chair, where she had been very quiet for the last several minutes. "Or that," Ava acknowledged. The room sat with the uncomfortable weight of a trust problem that didn't have a clean solution. Voss, who had been listening from the bed with his eyes on the ceiling, spoke. "The document chain on the drive," he said, "is it verifiable independently? If our tech team can authenticate the metadata and the digital signatures," Gray said, "yes, within about 3 hours of analysis. Then the question of whether Gale is who he says he is will answer itself," Voss said. "If the documents are real, his account is real. If they're constructed, we'll know within the hour." He looked at Dana. "Until then, treat him as a protected witness, not an asset, not a suspect, a protected witness." Dana nodded, the nod of someone who is professionally following a directive and personally not entirely settled with it, which Ava respected because it was honest. 2:31 p.m. Linda Chen appeared in the doorway of room 412 at 2:31, looking like a woman who had spent the last 3 hours absorbing information that far exceeded her context for it and had decided, somewhere in the last 15 minutes, that she was going to do her job regardless of context. She had a medication tray. She looked at Dana, at Gray, at the document spread across the foot of the bed, at the USB drive on the bedside table, and then at Ava with the expression of a woman who had 15 years of practice not reacting to things. "Scheduled antibiotic administration," she said to Ava, "per the updated counteragent protocol." "Come in," Ava said. Linda came to the bedside and set down the tray. She worked quietly, efficiently, and did not look at anyone except Ava and the patient in front of her. But when she was done, when she had logged the administration and was turning to leave, she stopped. "The man who fired you this morning," she said to Ava, not looking at her, looking at the doorway. "He's been in his office since 1 p.m. He hasn't come out." "I know," Ava said. "He looked—" Linda paused, chose her word carefully. "He looked like a man finding out the size of something he thought was much smaller." She picked up the tray. "I've worked for him for 11 years. I've seen him handle a lot of things. I've never seen him look like that." She left without another word. Ava watched her go and felt a complicated thing. Not sympathy for Simmons exactly, but a recognition that the consequences of this morning were spreading outward in directions that would touch people who had never asked to be anywhere near it. 2:38 p.m. The call came in on Dana's secure line at 2:38, and the way Dana answered it, the immediate straightening of her posture, the controlled flattening of her voice, told Ava before a single word was spoken that this was not a routine update. "When?" Dana said, and then, after a pause that lasted long enough to be significant, "How many?" Another pause. "Understood. Don't move until I authorize it. Hold position." She ended the call and looked at Gray. Something passed between them that was not quite alarm, not quite anything Ava had a word for, but it was large. "The relay receiver," Dana said. "Our contact reached the location 3 blocks out." "And?" Gray said. "It wasn't a single receiver," Dana said. "It was a hub, multiple incoming feeds from multiple transmitters." She looked at Voss. "Wick's device was one of at least 6 active transmitters feeding into that location. They've been monitoring this hospital for a long time, not just room 412, the entire East Wing, the pharmacy, the administration offices." She paused. "And the OR." The room went very still. "The OR," Ava said. 3 separate feeds from the surgical suite on the 2nd floor, Dana said. "Going back, based on the data our contact is seeing, at least 14 months. 14 months. The surgery that was happening right now in OR3, completely unrelated to any of this. Or was it?" Ava looked at Gray. "Who is in OR3 right now?" she said. Gray was already on his phone. 2:41 p.m. The answer came back in 40 seconds. "A scheduled cardiac procedure. Surgeon, Dr. Patricia Holloway, 14-year staff member, impeccable record. Patient, a 61-year-old man named Robert Ames, retired government contractor." Gray said the name twice. The second time he looked at Voss. Voss's expression did something Ava hadn't seen it do all day. It didn't change dramatically. He was too controlled for that. But something behind his eyes shifted in the way of a person for whom a piece has just moved into a position that changes the entire shape of the board. "Robert Ames," Voss said. "Was he on the operation authorization chain for Daniel Cho?" Gray checked his phone, looked up. He was the contracting liaison for the logistics company that provided cover infrastructure for the extraction operation. "He was a witness," Voss said. "A civilian witness to the authorization chain. If the investigation completes and goes to formal inquiry, his testimony would be significant," Dana said, and her voice had gone very flat in the way voices go when someone is working very hard to stay in front of something moving fast. "He's on the table right now," Ava said, "under anesthesia." Nobody said the next part out loud. They didn't need to. Ava was already moving toward the door. "Ava," Gray said sharply, "someone has to go to that OR," she said. "Right now, before the procedure finishes or before whatever is going to happen, happens." She looked at him. "You have 2 people with Wick in administration. Your field contact is 3 blocks out. Dana's managing the secure line. Who exactly are you sending?" Gray looked at Dana. The honest calculation of a person who has fewer resources than the situation requires. "I'm going," Ava said, I'm clinical staff. I have a reason to be anywhere in this hospital. You don't. 2:44 p.m. She moved through the east wing and up the stairwell to the second floor with the same controlled, unhurried speed she'd used in the south corridor. Fast enough to matter, careful enough not to draw the kind of attention that would slow her down. Her badge was back on her scrubs. Her ID said what it always said. She was a nurse with a reason to be wherever she was standing. The second floor surgical suite had its own nurses' station, its own pre-op bay, its own rhythm entirely separate from the rest of the hospital. The charge nurse here was a man named Paul, broad-shouldered and efficient, who looked up when Ava came through the doors and immediately clocked that she was East Wing, not second floor. "Can I help you?" he said, with the professional politeness that meant, "You're in the wrong place." "I need to speak with whoever is circulating in OR3, Ava said. "It's a clinical consult. Urgent. OR3 is in the middle of a procedure." "I know, I need 2 minutes with the circulating nurse. I can wait outside the suite. It's regarding a medication interaction that may affect the patient's current sedation protocol." Paul looked at her. The story was plausible. Medication interaction consults happened. Cross-department communication during active procedures happened. It wasn't routine, but it wasn't alarming. "1 minute," he said. "I'll send someone out." The circulating nurse who came to the suite door 40 seconds later was a woman Ava didn't know. Younger, early 30s, a name badge that read Sasha M. She came out pulling off one glove with the distracted efficiency of someone mid-task, and she looked at Ava with professional attention. "Medication consult?" Sasha said. "I need to know if there have been any additional personnel in that suite today beyond the scheduled surgical team," Ava said, dropping the pretense entirely, because pretense takes time, and she didn't have it. Sasha blinked. "What?" "Any equipment maintenance, any biomedical technician, any addition to the standard OR team that wasn't on the original surgical assignment." Sasha stared at her. "Who are you?" "East Wing clinical staff with a federal protective umbrella as of approximately noon today," Ava said. "I need you to answer the question, and I need you to do it right now." The directness landed the way directness lands when someone has been doing their job competently and is suddenly confronted with the possibility that their competent job is sitting inside a much larger situation. Sasha's face went from defensive to focused in about 2 seconds. "There was a biomedical check this morning," Sasha said. "Before the procedure started. Routine pre-procedure equipment audit. It's scheduled every Tuesday." "Who conducted it?" "I didn't check the badge personally. Paul would have logged it downstairs." Ava was already turning back toward Paul's station. 2:49 p.m. The log showed a biomedical access entry at 7:14 that morning. Badge number and department matched. The name on the entry was not Miguel Rodriguez this time. It was a different name, a different badge, a different department. But when Ava looked at the badge number and compared it to the number Dana had sent to her phone 20 minutes ago as part of the secondary audit, the audit that had flagged Wick's first clone badge, the last 4 digits matched in a pattern that was not coincidental. Same method, different cover identity. "Is the surgical team using any equipment brought in this morning during that audit?" Ava asked Paul. "I wasn't on shift for the pre-procedure check," Paul said. He was fully engaged now, his professional instincts having caught up with the urgency in the room. "But the anesthesia equipment is all from this morning's pre-procedure setup. I need you to call into that OR right now," Ava said. "Tell Dr. Holloway to pause the procedure. Tell her it's a critical equipment concern." "I can't instruct a surgeon to—" "Paul," she put both hands on his desk and looked at him directly. "The patient on that table may be the target of the same person who tampered with a restricted patient's IV line this morning on the East Wing. I am telling you this as clinical staff with federal oversight authorization. If you need me to get someone on the phone in the next 30 seconds who outranks everyone in this building to confirm that, I will. But every second we spend on that is a second the patient doesn't have." Paul looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. Then he picked up the intercom. 2:52 p.m. The pause in OR3 lasted 4 minutes, and in those 4 minutes, 3 things happened in rapid, overlapping sequence. First, the anesthesia equipment was visually inspected by Dr. Holloway's team, and a secondary line was found. A thin, supplementary feed attached to the primary anesthesia delivery system, running to a small sealed reservoir that had not been there during the pre-procedure setup the previous afternoon. The reservoir contained a compound that the OR nurse described as colorless and odorless. A compound that, once introduced into the primary anesthesia mix at the point of recovery, would create a cardiac event consistent with spontaneous surgical complication. Second, Gray arrived on the second floor, having apparently communicated with Paul from the stairwell, and took over the formal federal component of the situation with the compressed efficiency of a man who had been running on adrenaline and competence for the last 4 hours and was not slowing down. Third, Robert Ames, sedated and unaware that the procedure on his heart had been paused, continued to breathe steadily under the monitoring of a surgical team that had gone from confused to shaken in the span of about 90 seconds. Ava stood outside the suite door and let herself breathe for the first time in what felt like a very long time. It was not relief, not yet, not fully, but it was the specific exhale of a person who had arrived somewhere just ahead of the worst possible outcome. Sasha came out of the OR and stood beside her. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "He would have died," she said. "During recovery, it would have looked like a surgical complication." "Yes," Ava said, "and nobody would have—" "No," Ava said, "nobody would have." Sasha looked at her. "How did you know to come up here?" "I didn't," Ava said honestly. "I followed a connection, and I got here fast enough." She paused. This time. 3:04 p.m. She was back in room 412 at 3:04. The DIA medical team was now 22 minutes out. Voss's vitals had held steady. Gale was still in the supply room, and Gray had posted one of his people outside the connecting door, which was a pragmatic solution to the trust problem that didn't fully resolve the trust problem, but made it manageable. When she walked in, Voss looked at her face and read it the way he read everything. Quickly, completely, without asking unnecessary questions. "You found something in the OR," he said. "Robert Ames is alive," she said. "The procedure has been paused. Gray has the evidence." Voss closed his eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Ames was going to be the fallback, he said. If the investigation completed despite everything, if WIC failed, if the hospital plan failed, they were going to eliminate the one civilian witness who could corroborate the authorization chain. He opened his eyes. They planned 3 layers deep. "At least 3, Ava said. Dana, across the room, was on her phone again. The call was short and one-sided, Dana mostly listening, her expression going through several things in quick succession. And when she lowered the phone, she looked at Voss with an expression that was, under all the professional control, something that resembled awe. "The relay hub 3 blocks out," she said. "Our contact has it fully documented. 14 months of surveillance data, 6 transmitter feeds. The metadata traces to an IP registration chain that our technical team can follow within hours." She paused. "And the name at the end of that chain matches what Gale told me," Ava said. "Yes," Dana said. "It matches exactly." 3:11 p.m. The moment arrived the way significant moments often do. Not with fanfare, not with a dramatic single event, but with an accumulation of confirmed facts that reached a threshold and simply became undeniable. Gray came back into room 412 at 3:11 with the compound retrieved from the OR anesthesia line, now in an evidence bag, the documentation from the relay hub on his tablet, and a look on his face of a man carrying something historic and aware of it. "We have enough," he said. He said it quietly, but the quietness was not uncertainty. It was the quietness of something being stated for the record. Voss looked at the evidence bag, at the tablet, at the USB drive still sitting on his bedside table. The authorization chain, he said, the compound evidence, the surveillance data, the OR secondary line. He looked at Gray. And Wick. Wick is going to talk, Gray said. He's been in that administration office for the last 90 minutes, understanding more clearly what his options are. One of my people tells me he asked for paper and a pen 20 minutes ago. He's writing, Dana said. He's writing, Gray confirmed. Ava was at the window, not looking out, just standing at a slight remove from the center of the room, watching the people around her process the weight of what had assembled itself in the last 4 hours. She was thinking about Daniel Cho. She was thinking about the specific texture of being told you were wrong when you were right, the way it settled into you over time, the way you accommodated it because you had to keep moving, but it never fully left. There's something else, Gray said. He looked at Ava directly. The tech team ran a preliminary check on the USB drive contents. The authentication on the documents is solid. The authorization chain is exactly what Gale said it was. He paused. But there's a secondary file on the drive we didn't expect. What kind of file? Ava said. Personnel records, Gray said. Specifically, the records of everyone who was discharged in the 24 months following Daniel Cho's death. Everyone who filed a complaint, raised a flag, or submitted a formal objection to the official cause of death determination. He looked at her. There are 11 names on that list. She kept her face still. And 6 of them have had career difficulties traceable to coordinated institutional pressure, Gray said. 2 have had legal complications that don't hold up under scrutiny. 1 died in a car accident 14 months ago that was ruled accidental. He stopped. And 2 of them, Ava, are currently working civilian healthcare jobs in separate states, having accepted honorable discharges under circumstances that didn't leave them much choice. You're saying Cho wasn't the only target, she said. They went after everyone who noticed. They went after everyone who pushed back, Gray said. The room was very quiet. The 11 names, Voss said from the bed. They're going to need to know what's on that drive. Yes, Gray said, and the 6 with career damage, and the 2 with the legal complications. Voss looked at the USB drive. This doesn't end with Wick and Voss in the name at the top of the chain. This ends with every person who was pressured into silence getting their record corrected. He looked at Dana. That's not negotiable. Dana was quiet for a moment. That's going to require a level of institutional acknowledgement that, I know what it requires, Voss said. His voice was not raised. It was something considerably more effective than raised, certain. Completely and simply certain. Is it going to happen or not? Dana held his gaze. Yes, she said. It's going to happen. 3:19 p.m. The DIA medical team arrived at 3:19. 3 people, crisp and equipped, who moved into room 412 with the coordinated efficiency of a team that had been briefed en route and was picking up exactly where they needed to be. The lead physician, a woman named Dr. Serena Okafor, reviewed Ava's recalibration adjustments with focused attention and then looked up with an expression that was professionally measured but carried a specific quality. The recalibration at 11:57, Dr. Okafor said. The drip rate adjustment and the full line flush. Yes, Ava said. Based on the current metabolization profile, that adjustment is the reason his organ function is in the range it's in right now. She said it plainly, not dramatically, the way a physician states a clinical fact. The tampered line, without intervention, would have pushed the compound concentration past the threshold for irreversible cardiac stress within 4 to 6 hours of your morning assessment. I know, Ava said. You made the adjustment without a full tox panel, without knowing the compound name, without the counteragent specification sheet. I made the adjustment based on what I observed, Ava said. Doctor. Okafor looked at her for a moment with the particular expression of a person recalibrating an assessment. Where were you trained? She asked. Ava glanced at Voss. He was watching her with that expression she had come to recognize, the one that said he knew the answer and was content to let her give it, or not give it, as she chose. Different places, Ava said. Dr. Okafor accepted that with a brief nod and went back to the chart. Gray came to stand beside Ava near the window. He kept his voice below the range of the medical team's conversation. The name Gale gave you, he said, the name on the drive. We're going to need your formal statement. Everything Gale told you, everything you observed in that supply room, the full sequence. I know, she said. It's going to be a long process, he said. Formal inquiry, testimony, possibly congressional. He paused. You understand that once you give that statement, the target of this investigation will know exactly who you are and what you contributed. He already knows who I am, she said. Wick's transmitter broadcast my name, my history, and my conversation with Voss to whoever was listening at that relay hub. The window for anonymity closed around 1 p.m. Gray made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. You're very calm about that. I'm not calm, she said. I'm focused. There's a difference. He looked at her sideways. Voss said the same thing to me once, almost exactly the same words. Then maybe he and I were trained by people with similar philosophies, she said. Gray smiled. It was a small, controlled smile, but it was real. Maybe, he said. 3:28 p.m. Dr. Simmons came to room 412 at 3:28. He knocked, actually knocked, which he had not done on any previous visit to this wing today. And when Ava opened the door, he was standing in the hallway with the posture of a man who has rehearsed something and then, upon arrival, understood that no rehearsed version was going to be adequate. He looked at her. His eyes were tired in the specific way of someone who has spent 3 hours alone with the full account of their own decisions. The secretary's office called, he said. I've been given a comprehensive briefing on the situation, on everything. He stopped, tried again. On what has been operating inside this hospital for 9 years. On what was at stake when you... He stopped again. His jaw worked the way it had earlier, in the hallway, but the performance of authority was completely gone now. What was left was just a man. When you checked his pulse... Ava waited. I owe you an apology, he said. Not a diplomatic one. Not the kind I was told to deliver by someone in a federal office. A real one. He looked at her steadily. I grabbed your wrist. I humiliated you in front of your colleagues. I fired you for doing your job correctly, and I did it because I was frightened of something I didn't understand. And I dressed it up as authority because that's what I know how to do. His voice was controlled, but not easy. I was wrong, in every specific way that a person can be wrong in a professional context, and I am sorry. Ava looked at him for a moment. She thought about the badge hitting the floor. She thought about his voice saying, "You will never work in any hospital in this country again." She thought about Marcus walking her out, looking miserable, and Linda Chen staring at a point on the wall. I accept your apology, she said. I'm not going to tell you it didn't matter, because it did, but I accept it. He nodded. The relief and the continued discomfort on his face were both genuine, and she respected him more for not trying to collapse one into the other. The staff, he said, the people who saw what happened this morning, I'm going to address it, formally, with everyone present. That's your decision to make, she said. But yes, that would be the right thing. He nodded again, looked past her into the room, at the medical team, at the shape of Voss in the bed, at all of it. I've been running this hospital for 11 years, he said quietly. And today is the first day I understood that some things that happen inside these walls have nothing to do with medicine. Some do, Ava said. The important parts still do. He looked at her, and then he left, walking back down the hallway with slightly less certainty in his step than he'd carried that morning, and carrying something more honest in its place. 3:41 p.m. By 3:41, the room had changed in character. The DIA medical team had taken over the clinical management of Voss's case with a thorough, organized competence of people who had been trained for exactly this scenario. Gray had 3 active phone calls running in the corridor. Dana was at the small desk in the corner, building the formal chain of custody documentation for the USB drive and the OR evidence with the focused intensity of someone who understood that how you documented something was nearly as important as what the something was. Ava was standing by Voss's bed, doing something she hadn't done in hours. Not checking vitals, not making adjustments, not managing a threat. Just standing there, with nothing immediately required of her, in the specific, strange, suspended feeling of a person who has been running hard towards something and has just reached it. Voss was watching the ceiling with the same quality of attention he gave everything, complete, unhurried. "The operation in Central Asia," he said, not looking at her. 11 months ago. I found the asset. I got the evidence. I sent the communication that was intercepted." He paused. "I spent 3 weeks wondering if I had made errors that made all of it pointless." "You hadn't," she said. "No," he agreed, "but someone needed to check a pulse in the right moment for any of it to matter." He turned his head and looked at her. The gray eyes, in the better light of the late afternoon through the window, had something in them she hadn't seen before. Not warmth exactly, but its functional equivalent in a person who had been trained out of warmth and retained its shape. "You've been out of the field for 22 months. "Yes," she said. "Do you want to go back?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. She thought about the 8 months and the counted days and the pinned-back hair and the fluorescent lights that flickered. She thought about how she had felt walking into room 412 this morning and finding the air wrong in a way she recognized. "I want the 11 names on that drive to have their records corrected," she said. "I want Daniel Cho's daughter to have a true answer when she's old enough to ask. I want the person whose name is at the top of that authorization chain to face what they've done." She looked at him. "After that, I'll figure out what I want." Voss looked at her for another moment. "That's an honest answer," he said. "It's the only kind I have," she said. Somewhere in the East Wing, a cart wheeled past the door. A monitor beeped its steady rhythm. The ordinary machinery of a hospital, keeping people alive, one measured breath at a time, continued exactly as it always had. And in room 412, the USB drive sat on the bedside table in the late afternoon light, small and unremarkable, carrying the weight of everything that had been done in the dark and was now, finally, moving toward the light. The formal statement process began at 4:03 in the small conference room adjacent to the East Wing administrative offices, and it was not what Ava had expected, which was saying something because she had spent most of the day revising her expectations at high speed. She had expected a recorded deposition, a federal agent with a standardized form, the kind of procedural interview that moved through events chronologically and treated everything as data to be cataloged. What she got instead was Gray sitting across from her with no recording equipment visible, a legal pad, and the expression of a man who understood that the most important part of what she had to say could not be captured in a formatted report. "Start with the supply room," he said. "Gail." Everything he said, the exact words where you can remember them. She told him. She spoke for 21 minutes without interruption, and Gray wrote in a compressed, efficient hand that covered the page faster than she would have expected. And when she was done, he reviewed the page for a moment and then looked up. "The name he gave you," Gray said, "you haven't said it out loud since the room." "No," she said. "I need you to say it now, for the record." She said it. She said it clearly and without hesitation, and it landed in the room the way it had landed in room 412, with the specific gravity of a thing that, once said, could not be unsaid, and that changed the shape of everything around it. Gray wrote it down. He underlined it once. He did not react beyond that, which she respected, because the professionalism of not reacting was its own kind of respect for the seriousness of what was being put on that page. Gale's documentation corroborates it, Gray said. The Relay Hub metadata corroborates it. Wick, as of 40 minutes ago, has put it on paper himself. He set down the pen. 3 independent chains of evidence pointing to the same name. That's enough for the preliminary warrant. Who issues it? Ava asked. Someone who has been waiting 14 months for exactly this convergence, Gray said. He looked at her steadily. Arthur Gale spent 14 months trying to route this evidence through channels that kept getting compromised. He finally walked it into a civilian hospital and handed it to a fired nurse. He paused. Because the fired nurse had no channels to compromise. He took a significant risk, Ava said. He took the only risk that was left, Gray said. Everything institutional had been closed off. Every agent, every officer, every official pathway had a point of vulnerability that had been exploited or could be exploited. He picked up the pen again. You were the gap in the system, the thing nobody had planned for, the variable that couldn't be predicted or controlled or preemptively neutralized. She sat with that for a moment. Because I was nobody, she said. Because you were exactly the right person in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment, Gray said. And you had absolutely nothing to lose by doing the right thing. He looked at her. That is extraordinarily rare. 4:29 p.m. The warrant was issued at 4:29. Ava knew this because Dana came to the door of the conference room at 4:31, knocked twice, and said those 3 words with the compressed energy of someone delivering a fact that has been a long time coming and has finally arrived. The warrant issued, Dana said. Gray stood up from the table. Clean? Federal judge, unimpeachable record, out of district to avoid any conflict of interest. Dana's voice was controlled. She was holding it very still, the way you hold something fragile. The arrest is scheduled for 6 p.m. today. 2 federal marshals and a DOJ representative. The DOD is being informed concurrently. The name that had been said out loud in this room 30 minutes ago was, as of this moment, attached to a legal process that could not be quietly buried or institutionally redirected. It was real. It was documented. It was moving forward with the machinery of consequence behind it. Ava felt something move through her that was not triumph. Triumph was too clean, too simple for what this was. It was something more complicated and more durable. The specific sensation of a truth that had been held underwater for 22 months, finally breaking the surface and filling its lungs. Gale, she said, he needs to be moved to a secure location before 6. Already in process, Dana said. Gray's team is moving him in the next 15 minutes. He'll be in federal protective custody by 5. And Wick? Wick's written statement has been authenticated. He's cooperating fully. Dana paused. He asked me to tell you. She stopped. Tell me what? Ava said. He said he knew, when he saw the surveillance footage of you in room 412 this morning, that the operation was already over. Dana's voice was careful. He said the way you resecured that catheter told him everything about who you were and what you were going to do next. He said he should have pulled out then. Ava said nothing for a moment. He underestimated a nurse, she said. He underestimated you specifically, Dana said, which is a different thing. 4:44 p.m. She went back to Voss at 4:44. The DIA medical team had fully taken over the clinical management, and Dr. Okafor had told Ava 30 minutes ago that her continued presence was not medically necessary. She went back anyway, not because Voss needed her to, because she needed to. He was more alert than he had been at any point in the day. The compound in his system was responding to the full counteragent protocol, and the color had come back into his face in the gradual, undramatic way that genuine medical recovery happens. Not a sudden transformation, but an accumulation of small improvements that added up to a person who looked, incrementally, more like themselves. "The warrant issued," she said from the doorway. He didn't move, just absorbed it the way he absorbed everything, completely, without performance. 6 p.m., he said. "How did you know the time?" "Dana's phone call in the hallway carried," he said. "The walls in this wing are thinner than the architects would like to admit." She almost smiled. She came to sit in the chair beside the bed. Outside, the late afternoon had moved toward early evening without her fully noticing, the way time moved on a long day. Not in measured steps, but in sudden jumps. Whole hours compressed into the space between one breath and the next. "There are 11 names on that drive," she said. "People like me. People who noticed something, said something, got pushed out." She looked at the USB drive, which had been moved to a secured evidence bag, but was still on the bedside table, waiting for formal transfer. "They've been living with it, the same way I've been living with it. The record corrections will begin within 72 hours, Voss said. "I've been told, formally." "Told by whom?" "By the DoD General Counsel's office, who called Gray's secure line at 4:15 and was extremely motivated to convey institutional good faith." His voice was dry. Not bitter, just precise. "They're trying to get ahead of the story," Ava said. "They are absolutely trying to get ahead of the story," Voss agreed. "The distinction between institutional good faith and institutional self-preservation is mostly semantic at this stage. Either way, the corrections happen." He looked at her. "For you and for the 10 others. Honorable discharge records amended. Career interference documented and addressed. Formal acknowledgement that the official cause of death determination for Daniel Cho was incorrect." Ava pressed her hands flat on her thighs and kept her voice even. "When?" "The preliminary order goes to the records office by end of business tomorrow," he said. "Full formal reinstatement of cleared status within 30 days. He paused. "If you want it." She heard the if. It was a real if, not a rhetorical one. He was not assuming. He was asking in the specific way of a person who understands that what someone is owed and what someone wants are not always the same thing. "I don't know yet," she said. "I've been a civilian nurse for 22 months. I've been counting days because counting is the only way I know how to hold something still long enough to look at it." She looked at her hands. "Today I stopped counting." He was quiet for a moment. "What does that mean to you?" "I'm not sure," she said, "but it feels like the start of something rather than the end." 5:02 p.m. Linda Chen found her in the East Wing corridor at 5:02, standing at the nurse's station, updating the last of her documentation with the focused attention of someone finishing a shift that had started in one universe and was ending in a completely different one. Linda set a cup of coffee on the counter beside Ava's tablet. Hot, the right amount of cream, the way Ava took it, and stood there without saying anything for a moment. "You knew," Ava said. Not accusatory, just the recognition of a fact she should have named earlier. "I didn't know what was in that room," Linda said carefully. "I knew enough to understand that asking questions would cost me something I wasn't prepared to pay at 7 in the morning." She wrapped both hands around her own cup. "I've been running this floor for 15 years. There have been 3 patients in that time who came through the private entrance with thin charts and federal authorization codes. I learned the second time not to ask about the third." "What happened the second time?" Linda was quiet. "The nurse who asked questions had her shift reassignment request denied for 2 years, she said. Her evaluations went from excellent to satisfactory for no documentable reason. She eventually transferred to a different hospital in a different state." She looked at Ava. "I watched that happen, and I told myself I was protecting my staff by not asking questions. And then I watched Simmons fire you this morning, and I told myself the same thing." She paused. "I was wrong both times." "You let me back in," Ava said. "This morning after Dana reinstated me. You could have made it complicated. You gave me the access logs without hesitation. That was the least I could do." Linda said. It was self-aware without being self-flagellating, and Ava respected it. It mattered, Ava said. The logs mattered. 14 minutes. That was the entry that broke the sequence open. Linda looked at her. I've been a nurse for 15 years, she said. I have never had a shift like this one. Neither have I, Ava said, and I've had some significant shifts. Linda almost smiled. I know, she said. I read your record this afternoon after Dana reinstated you. Whatever they redacted, the shape of what's left tells you a lot. She picked up her coffee. You're a good nurse, Ava. You were a good nurse before today. Whatever else you are, whatever other life you came from, you are genuinely good at this. Ava looked at the cup of coffee on the counter. The warmth of it, the ordinary specific kindness of someone who knew how you took your coffee. Thank you, she said, and she meant it in a way that was about more than the coffee. 5:31 p.m. The East Wing was quieter at 5:31 than it had been at any point in the day. The late shift was coming on, the incoming nurses receiving a handoff summary that was, by necessity, significantly more incomplete than a standard handoff summary. Dana had briefed the department heads on a version of events that covered the security concerns without the full operational context. And the result was that everyone in Mercy General knew something serious had happened today, and nobody outside rooms 412 and the federal custody chain knew exactly what. Ava was finishing her final documentation when Marcus appeared at the end of the corridor. He was off duty. He had a jacket on over his uniform shirt, the jacket he kept in his locker for post-shift, and he was carrying his bag, but he had clearly not left the building. He walked to where she was standing and stopped. I heard, he said, not the details, but enough. You should probably go home, she said. Your daughter must be waiting. She's with her grandmother until 7, he said. I wanted to... He stopped, tried again. When I walked you out this morning, I knew it was wrong. I knew the whole thing was wrong from the second Simmons started talking. And I walked you out anyway because it was my job and because I didn't know what else to do. He looked at her with the honest, direct discomfort of a person who had been sitting with a specific shame all day. I should have said something. Marcus, she said, you have a job that you need to keep. You have a daughter who needs you to be employed. I do not, for 1 second, hold this morning against you. I hold it against myself, he said. That's your right, she said, but don't let it sit in you too long. You did your job. And then today happened the way it happened, and I came back through those doors anyway. She looked at him. We're all right. He nodded, the specific, weightier nod of a person not fully convinced, but choosing to carry it differently. Are you coming back, he asked, to this floor, regularly? She thought about it. I don't know yet, she said, but I think so. Good, he said simply. You're the best nurse on this floor, and everyone here knows it, even the ones who haven't said it. He left, and she watched him go, and she thought about how much of a life is assembled from exactly these moments. Not the large, decisive ones, not the ones that make it into documents in formal records and evidence bags, but the cup of coffee with the right amount of cream, and the colleague who came back to say the thing he needed to say, and the small, specific weight of being seen accurately by the people standing right next to you. 5:47 p.m. At 5:47, 13 minutes before the federal marshals were scheduled to execute the warrant, Ava's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it. Miss Calloway. The voice was one she didn't recognize. Older, male, the kind of voice that had spent decades being listened to and had the specific gravity of that in every syllable. I'm calling on behalf of the Secretary of Defense. I've been asked to convey the Secretary's personal acknowledgement of your actions today and to communicate that your security clearance reinstatement has been authorized at the highest possible level, effective immediately. She was standing in the East Wing corridor with her back to the nurses' station. That's not why I did any of this, she said. No, the voice said. We understand that. which is, I'm told, exactly why it's being offered. A brief pause. There's a second item. The secretary would like to extend a formal invitation to discuss a potential role within the DoD Medical Oversight Division. A role that would have the authority to review and investigate anomalous clinical incidents at federal adjacent facilities. Another pause. The specific incidents that happened today and the 11 people on that drive suggest that role has been needed for some time. She was quiet for a moment. She thought about what Voss had said, the start of something rather than the end. She thought about what Gray had said, the gap in the system, the variable that couldn't be predicted. She thought about 11 names and one daughter who was 3 years old and growing up in Honolulu, and a truth that had been held underwater for 22 months. "Tell the secretary I'll think about it," she said, "and tell him I'll need that conversation in writing." "Understood," the voice said, and the call ended. She stood in the corridor for a moment. She breathed. She thought about room 412 and the moment she had touched a patient's wrist this morning and felt something wrong in his pulse. The small, physical, irreducible act of a person doing their job with full attention. She thought about how every subsequent thing had followed from that moment. Not from strategy, not from heroism, not from anything that would fit neatly into a formal commendation, just from a pair of steady hands and the refusal to pretend she hadn't noticed what she'd noticed. 6:04 p.m. The arrest happened at 6:04, 4 minutes behind schedule, in a building on the other side of the city that Ava would read about later in a document with more redactions than text. She was not there. She was in room 412 when Dana's phone buzzed with the confirmation, and she watched Dana's face absorb it with the same controlled professionalism Dana had applied to everything today. And underneath the professionalism, she saw the same thing she had seen in herself an hour ago. Not triumph, but the more durable thing. The thing that stays after the adrenaline clears. Voss received the news with his eyes closed. He kept them closed for a moment after Dana read the confirmation text. When he opened them, he looked at the ceiling and then at Ava. And what was in his face was the cleanest and most unguarded thing she had seen there all day. "Daniel Cho," he said. "Yes," she said. "It's not enough," he said. "It will never be completely enough." He was 27 years old, and he had a daughter he'd never met. He said it plainly, the way you say something that has no softened version. "But it's what we have. It's what we could do. It's what we did," she said. Gray came in at 6:09 with the USB drive in a sealed evidence transfer case, and the expression of a man at the end of an extremely long day who has arrived somewhere worth arriving. He set the case on the desk, signed the custody form Dana handed him, and then stood for a moment in the particular stillness of someone who has nothing immediately required of them for the first time in hours. "Dr. Okafor says Voss can be transferred to the secure medical facility by 10 tonight, he said. "Recovery timeline is 10 to 14 days with the full protocol." "Good," Ava said. "The 11 names on the drive," Gray said, looking at her directly. "The preliminary record correction orders go out first thing tomorrow morning. All 11, simultaneously." He paused. "The DoD General Counsel's office wanted to phase them over a 2-week period. I told them the answer was no." "Thank you," Ava said. "Don't thank me," Gray said. "It was the right thing." He said it with the simple conviction of a man to whom the right thing and the done thing had always been the same thing. "Also," he said, and something in his voice shifted slightly, "Gail wants to speak with you before he's moved to protective custody." He asked specifically. He said he had one more thing to say. 6:23 p.m. They brought Gail to a private room on the second floor at 6:23, and he was different in this room than he had been in the supply room. Less contained, less performing the specific composure of a man in a precarious position. The precarious position was over. What was left was just a person who was very tired and very old in the particular way of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has recently set it down. He was sitting in the chair when she came in, and he looked at her with the frank assessment she had come to recognize from men like him. Men who had spent careers measuring people quickly and accurately and had no more patience for imprecision. "I want to tell you something," he said, "not for the record, not for the statement, just one person to another." She sat down across from him. "Go ahead." "I've been in this work for 37 years, he said. "I've seen operations succeed and fail. I've seen good people compromised and bad people protected. I've watched the machinery of institutional power grind through things that should never have been ground through." He laced his fingers together and looked at them. "And in 37 years, I've encountered 3 people who I would describe as genuinely unmanageable. Not difficult, not uncooperative, unmanageable. Meaning the standard tools of institutional pressure, career threat, reputation damage, isolation, simply did not alter their course." She waited. "Voss is one," he said. "He was operating before anyone understood he couldn't be stopped. The attempt to stop him cost them resources they didn't expect to spend." He looked up. "And you are another, which they understood too late, which is, in the end, the only reason we're sitting in this room right now." He looked at her steadily. "They planned for agents. They planned for investigators. They planned for people operating inside systems that could be pressured or controlled." He paused. "They did not plan for a nurse who counted days and checked a pulse on her own initiative at 7 in the morning." "I was just doing my job," she said. "Yes," he said, "that is exactly right. You were just doing your job. In a system that had spent years making sure that doing your job correctly would cost you everything, you did it anyway. Today, and 22 months ago, when you flagged Daniel Cho's death." He held her gaze. "Do you know how rare that is?" She thought about the 10 other names on the drive, the people who had noticed, who had pushed back, who had been ground down for it. "It shouldn't be rare," she said. "No," Gale agreed, "it shouldn't." He unfolded his hands and set them flat on his knees. "That role the secretary offered you, the oversight position." She looked at him. "News travels fast." "I suggested it," he said simply, 4 hours ago, before the warrant. I told the secretary's liaison that if this operation resulted in a successful outcome, the one structural change most likely to prevent a recurrence was the creation of an independent medical oversight function staffed by someone with clinical competence, field experience, and no institutional loyalty to protect. He paused. "You were the only name I gave them." She absorbed that, the weight of it, the specific feeling of being accurately seen by someone you have known for less than 3 hours. "You gave them my name before you knew if any of this would work," she said. "I gave them your name at 1:22 p.m., he said, "approximately 8 minutes after you came through the supply room door and took the USB drive without flinching." He looked at her. "I had enough information at that point." She was quiet for a moment. Outside the room, the hospital continued its evening rhythm. The change of shift, the routine of vitals and medications, and the 1,000 small acts of care that constituted the ordinary practice of keeping people alive. The world Ava had inhabited for 8 months and 26 days, which she had chosen because it was the furthest thing from classified operations and covert missions and compromised authorization chains, and which had turned out to be, today, the exact theater in which all of those things converged. "I'll take the meeting," she said, "with the secretary." Gale nodded, one small, satisfied nod. "Good," he said. 6:41 p.m. She went back to room 412 one final time at 6:41. The DIA medical team was completing its pre-transfer assessment. Dr. Okafor was reviewing the final vitals with the focused attention of someone signing off on a handoff they wanted to be airtight. 2 federal agents Ava had not seen before were positioned near the door with the quiet readiness of people whose job was to make sure the next few hours were uneventful. Voss was dressed for transfer, not in hospital clothes, in his own clothes, a dark shirt and jacket that someone had brought without Ava knowing when. He looked more like himself than he had all day, more like the man in the surveillance photograph, and less like a patient. The gray eyes were clear and sharp. He looked at her when she came in. "Okafor says you saved my life," he said. "Okafor is being dramatic," she said. "Okafor is being accurate," he said, which is her professional standard and why I trust her assessment. He held her gaze. "Thank you." "Don't," she said. "I'm going to," he said, "because I want to say it and because you are going to have to sit here and let me." He said it without particular emotion, which made it more serious, not less. "You came back to this hospital after being publicly humiliated and physically manhandled. You recalibrated my IV without a tox panel, without a compound specification, using only what you could observe. You located Wick, you reached the OR before the secondary line was deployed, and you received evidence from a man you had known for 4 minutes and correctly assessed it as trustworthy." He paused. "All of that, on a Tuesday, 8 months into a civilian nursing job you were using to hide from a career you should not have had to hide from." He looked at her steadily. "Thank you." She sat with that. She let it land without deflecting it because it deserved to land, and because she had spent 22 months not allowing herself to be seen accurately, and she was done with that. "Come back from this," she said. "The recovery, all 14 days of it, full protocol, no arguing with Okafor." "I don't argue with Okafor," he said. "You were arguing with me about lying back down 6 hours ago," she said. "That was different," he said. "That was a tactical assessment. It was stubbornness in a clinical setting," she said. "Don't do it with Okafor." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, not quite not. "Noted," he said. Dana appeared at the doorway. "Transfer team is ready," she said. "We need to move." Voss stood. He did it steadily without assistance, which told Ava everything she needed to know about where his recovery was headed. He picked up nothing because there was nothing to pick up. Everything that mattered had been moved to evidence bags and secure transfer cases and the formal custody chain that would carry it from this room into the machinery of justice. He looked at her one more time. "The oversight role," he said. "If you take it, and I think you should, you are going to find more than 11 names. You're going to find a pattern that goes deeper and wider than one authorization chain and one embedded operative." He said it without alarm, as a simple, factual statement. "Be ready for that." "I know," she said. "I know you know," he said. "I'm saying it anyway. Because the thing about unmanageable people is that the system keeps trying to manage them, even after the first attempt fails. You understand that?" "I do," she said. He held her gaze for one more moment, and in that moment there was a complete and mutual recognition of what they had each been and what they had each lost, and what had been recovered today and what still lay ahead. It was the kind of recognition that didn't require language, because language would have diminished it. Then he walked out of room 412, and Dana fell into step beside him, and the 2 federal agents moved with them, and the corridor received them with the ordinary efficiency of a building doing what buildings do, providing the space for people to move through moments that are anything but ordinary. 7 p.m. Ava Calloway stood in room 412 at exactly 7 o'clock and looked at the empty bed. The monitors were off. The IV pole stood bare. The USB drive was gone. The evidence bag was gone. The document schematic Gray had left at the foot of the bed was gone. The room looked the way it would look to the next patient admitted. Neutral, clean, functional, carrying no visible trace of what had happened inside it today. She picked up her tablet from the bedside table. Her shift documentation was complete. Every vital, every adjustment, every administration logged with the precise, careful notation of a nurse who understood that the smallest detail could be the one that mattered most. 8 months and 27 days of practice. 22 months of something larger than that. She clipped her badge back to her scrubs. Simmons had found it on the floor outside the nurse's station at some point in the afternoon and left it on her desk without a word, which was, she thought, the most honest thing he had done all day. And she walked out of room 412 and pulled the door closed behind her. Linda was at the nurse's station. 2 night shift nurses she knew were beginning the evening handoff. The corridor had the quieter, steadier rhythm of a hospital after the peak of the day, when the acute crises have been managed and the work settles into the long, patient business of recovery. Linda looked at her. "Tomorrow?" she said. Ava thought about the meeting with the secretary's office, the 11 names, the record corrections going out first thing in the morning, the oversight role and the deeper pattern Voss had told her to be ready for, the 3-year-old girl in Honolulu who would one day have a true answer. "Tomorrow," Ava said. She walked down the East Wing corridor and through the double doors and past the nurse's station where she had been fired this morning in front of everyone. Past the waiting area where the woman with the magazine had been replaced by a different woman with a different concern on her face. Through the lobby where Priya gave her a small, significant nod that carried a whole conversation inside it, and out through the glass doors into the evening. The air outside was cold and clean. The parking lot lights had come on in the early dark. Somewhere in the city, the formal machinery of accountability was doing what it had not been allowed to do for 22 months. Moving forward, gathering speed, becoming unstoppable. She stood on the sidewalk outside Mercy General Hospital and breathed. This morning, she had walked in as a nurse with 8 months on the job and a quiet, careful life built on counted days and pinned-back hair and the deliberate practice of being unremarkable. Tonight, she walked out as exactly who she had always been, the person who noticed the 2mm shift, who flagged the wrong pulse, who checked the vitals nobody asked her to double-check, and followed the connection nobody else had followed all the way to its end. She had not saved Colonel Voss by being exceptional. She had saved him by being exactly, completely, and uncompromisingly herself. Steady hands, clear eyes, and the particular stubbornness of a person who had decided, at some fundamental level, that the truth was the only thing worth being loyal to. That was not something any institution could train into you. It was not something any discharge order could take away. And as of today, it was not something anyone was going to pretend they hadn't seen. Ava Calloway put her badge in her pocket, walked to her car, and drove home through the lit streets of Alexandria, not hiding anymore, not counting days, not waiting for a life that had, without her fully noticing, already begun.